So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
All right, here we go.
New Phineas and Ferb is here.
We're back, baby.
For 104 more days.
I know what we're gonna do today.
Of summer vacation.
I am ready for summer shenanigans. Let's do it. Oh, yeah.
All right. We're gonna bust Phineas and Ferb once and for all.
Are we gonna do this again?
New inventions, shenanigans, innators, adventures, and songs.
Brand new summer vacation.
New Phineas and Ferb starts June 5th on Disney Channel and next day on Disney Plus on disneyplus.disney.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
You have to control yourself.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking any hillbillies up there, we're talking rural horror, and we're talking dueling banjos. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're gonna rape this whole goddamn landscape. We're gonna rape it!
Oh my god. So that actually was my line. And then I was like, I can't open with that.
I know. Well, so you didn't open with that. I opened with that. But
of course.
That line is kind of like very thematically. Y'all. Okay. So.
Yeah. It's double thematically relevant. But also, there are so many references to like ass and rape and like gay shit in this movie. I was surprised for a 1972 film.
Very much so. I think I can understand why it has such notoriety. But yes, everyone, we are discussing John Boorman's Deliverance, a film that, content warnings.
Yes, definitely a content warning for sexual assault. And I mean, that's it, right? Like the scene is definitely there. It's more tasteful than I remember. I don't think it's good. I think it's actually quite in your face. I mean, it's in this actor's face, but like I remembered this dominating every conversation, every offhand remark I'd ever heard about the film. And when I finally watched it, I was kind of surprised that it's not the focal point of the film.
It's very much not. Like yes, the rape happens, but it's not a rape revenge film. Even though I think it shares some DNA with a rape revenge film, but it's not.
Yes.
It's more of a survival film than a revenge film.
100% a survival film. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you saw this?
Okay. So, full confession. I definitely thought that I had seen this whole thing, and then when I was watching it for this very recording, I realized there are whole sections of this that don't connect. So I think I had seen the rape sequence in isolation and like read about other things. So I think this was actually my first time watching it.
Well, so I guess, what did you think?
I liked it for the most part. You had warned me in advance because you watched this and you messaged me and said, I'm really curious to see how you're going to do your plot synopsis because there's not that much here. Like whole stretches of the film are truly watching them shoot these rapids and try to survive various situations. But like it isn't a plot driven film. And yet I finished it and kind of had to sit with it for a while because I do think there's a lot more going on here than many people would give it credit for.
I agree. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the source material, which is James Dickey's 1970 novel of the same name. Because James Dickey was like a poet. He's like, an award-winning writer. And so I think that I'm actually really curious to read this book to see how it reads because I found a lot of the film to be very, for lack of a better term, poetic in that way. But not necessarily dialogue driven either.
No, not at all. It's actually a lot of just kind of wilderness imagery. And I found that there were two conversations it feels like the film is having. One is definitely this concept of rural horror. But of course, this film is one of the films that defines that as a subgenre. Like watching this, I was just like, Jesus Christ, Wrong Turn owes this movie money because it gets everything from here, including a character name, Trace.
Oh my God, wait, which one?
Toothless.
Oh, I didn't even know that was his name, but yeah, that makes sense. I was waiting for Three Finger to pop up.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely saw this in high school. Like, this is in my I'm Netflix mailing classic movies. I've heard Deliverance is amazing. I knew about the rape scene. I
was gonna say, shouldn't your parents have stepped in at that point? Or
no, I was in high school. I was 17 years old by this point, so it was fine. But again, it was that thing where I watch it and I was like, oh, that's it. Because I think I was expecting it to be a lot more upsetting and disturbing because, again, I feel like even today, like almost 50 years, actually more than 50 years after this movie has come out, people still, like, even if you haven't seen Deliverance, it's like, oh yeah, the one with the male rape scene.
Yeah, or they do the line, right?
Oh, squeal like a pig, which, and actually, I think that's how I probably first heard about it too, because I think my dad told me about it.
Right, yeah.
But, I definitely appreciated this movie a lot more in a rewatch. It's not something that I would want to revisit often, and not even because it's really upsetting. Like, again, the rape scene is upsetting, but I will agree with you that it's quote-unquote tastefully done compared to much of the other rape scenes I've seen put on film.
Yeah, and I do want to have a discussion about whether that has something to do with the fact that it's men raping men as opposed to the usual thing, which is men raping women.
I think that's a valid discussion to have, but I also think it's the 1972 of it all. Like, this was a mainstream Warner Brothers studio picture, and I mean, even in some of the negative reviews of the film, which there weren't too many, but Roger Ebert's review called this out for being like an exploitation film, and so I wonder if that's part of the discussion too, where it's like, well, no, they weren't going to make it an exploitation film, but even the fact that there is a rape scene in here, people were calling it an exploitation film.
Yeah, I mean, this is coming out in such a bizarre period, and I know, I'm trying not to step on your production history, but coming so early in the 70s, this film feels like one of those lightning rod, not necessarily for controversy, so much as it is so emblematic of where particularly the US was at, not just in terms of the way we're making movies, because this is coming, I want to say a year or two after Deep Throat. So we were still very much experimenting and movies were making tons of money despite all their controversies and exploitative elements, but also this is coming right as we're coming out of the 60s with the free love movement and all of that other jazz, and going into the 70s, which is so politically driven. But you can tell this movie is basically saying, men, find your masculinity.
Oh, absolutely. And also, I think it's important to note that the Vietnam War is still going on at this time. Right. And I think a lot of this film plays with PTSD, not necessarily from war, but I think that the experiences are comparable for these characters.
Right. I mean, technically, these civilized men go into the jungle and they get into combat-style situations.
Yes. I have so many thoughts and questions about the men with you, but
yes.
Okay, so we'll just jump into this, though. So... Okay, yes, Deliverance, as I said, based on James Dickey's 1970 novel of the same name. He was a poet. He had a reputation in the world of letters, which was a new phrase, the world of letters.
World of letters.
He had been a poetry consultant at the Library of Congress. He'd won a National Book Award, as well as many other honors attached to the poetry he had been writing. But
wow.
I know. He had been thinking about Deliverance for several years and finally put pen to paper, or fingers to typewriter, I guess, and wrote it. The book went on to be a success, and interesting, a lot of the accolades I found for it were from way after it came out. So in 1998, the editors of Modern Library placed Deliverance as number 42 on their list of the 100 best 20th century novels. And in 2005, it was included on Time Magazine's list of the 100 best English language novels written since 1923.
Okay, so... not necessarily a reappraisal, but maybe it just needed some time to simmer before it was getting some of these big, high accolades.
I mean, and maybe it was getting good reviews. And I mean, it sold well. It did well. Obviously, it did well enough to get a movie made out of it.
Right. Almost immediately.
Almost immediately. Exactly. So the book shot Dickey into a new kind of fame that he wasn't really used to. And this included the attention of Hollywood. So... Enter director John Boorman, who would go on to direct the cult classic Zardoz and the widely panned Exorcist II the Heretic.
Okay, yeah, I thought his name sounded familiar.
Yeah, he was really well known by this point for a 1967 film called Point Blank.
Okay.
But I think this was really kind of the movie that, like, made him.
But wait, now you have to tell me, what is that movie about then?
Well, it's fine. I wouldn't really know this, but Point Blank is a 1963 like crime noir pulp film based on a series of books that seems to be following the same kind of either agent or detective character played by Lee Marvin.
Okay, interesting. I've never heard of it.
Well, it was in 2016, it was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress in the United States. So,
okay, just like this movie.
Just like this movie. So, okay, John Boorman was, I guess, walking around the Warner Brothers studio, and he was in the galleys, which I was like, what's a galleys? Because I thought that was a ship term.
It's the kitchen.
No? Galleys is a printer's proof in the form of long single-column strips, not in sheets or pages. Yeah,
we did know that. It's just that we needed the whole definition to get there.
I just didn't know it was called the galleys. But basically, it just sounds like Warner Brothers has like this room that's the galleys, where any books that they're dealing with, like they have like the pre-release, they have like the proofs in there that they can read.
Right. Yeah, because if you want to option something, it's like, here's the exciting new things. Let us know if you want to do something with them.
And things that haven't been released yet.
Yeah.
So the book was in there because a young employee at Warner Brothers was a former student of James Dickey's and suggested it to them.
Okay.
Boorman read it and loved it, really connecting to the symbolism of man's attempt to conquer nature. That these four urban men wanted to reestablish their connection with nature. And again,
is that what the film in the book is about?
He says this, and I was like, okay.
No, I think you've misread the text. I mean, that's definitely a component of it, but no.
Maybe that's the thing, is like he knows that's not what the whole thing is about, or like what the thesis of the film is, but he liked that aspect of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Now, the screenplay is credited to James Dickey, but Boorman had a lot of input, despite not having a screenwriting credit to his name. So Dickey would basically, this is so analog. Dickey would write pages and then also write letters about the pages he was sending to Boorman. And Boorman would respond in kind with another letter. So like, this is how they were on the phone talking about it. They were just sending script pages, writing letters, making notes, editing, writing script pages, sending them. Like this whole thing over and over and over and over.
Sounds so quaint.
Yeah, very much so. Probably very calming. Sit by your fireplace, you know.
Well, okay, you say that, but I found numerous different articles that reference the fact that this set was a cesspool of machismo, and apparently Dickey and Boorman got into the mix.
Yeah, so Dickey, I'm sure you had this in your plot, but he's in the movie playing the sheriff of this town, and he does not seem like someone I would want to be friends with.
Okay.
Not because he's an asshole, but I mean, just that machismo you're talking about. Like, it's a very southern macho vibe. And I'm sure he was a very nice man, but he had a very strong personality and often clashed with some of the actors specifically. Because also, I mean, this was his book. He was originally like brought on to be on set for most of the time until he just kept interrupting. And so they were like, you gotta go, dude.
You gotta go. We're trying to make this movie.
Yeah. So once they had a script in place, Boorman went to John Calley and Ted Ashley, who were running the Warner Brothers studio at the time, and they were all for it, but then they were like, okay, so you need to make it with two stars. So 2 of your 4 characters need to be stars. And
of course, yes.
He found those stars, but the cost was too high. So then the studio was like, ooh, actually, let's just do a cast full of unknowns. Get rid of those 2 named actors you got. And so he did.
Wait, do you know who the stars were?
I don't know. Because honestly, so all of this I'm pulling from the Blu-ray, which has a hour-long making-of featurette and Boorman's commentary, and then a vintage featurette, which I thought was really interesting. But
I love them.
I know. But in one of them, he just goes straight into, oh yeah, the studio told us that they wanted 4 unknowns. But in the commentary, he says, oh no, they said they wanted 2 stars. Then I got them. Then they told me, no, they're too expensive. Do 4 unknowns. So
interesting. Okay, because I know that John Boyd was definitely a known property, but I think he had been having some career issues. Like this helped to get him back on the A-list. And then Burt Reynolds, this is considered his big breakout. So those 2 are definitely not big name stars. And then the other 2 guys are Broadway dudes.
Well, yeah, this is both of their first feature film for Ned Beatty and Ronnie Cox. So
yeah, so I guess this is the before quote unquote unknowns.
Exactly. So the first two actors they got were Ronnie Cox and Ned Beatty, because Boorman basically went to go look for Southern men in their early 30s that had a lot of theater training, and that narrowed the pool by a lot.
I was going to say Southern in a certain age range. Yeah.
Also, learned today, Ned Beatty, not related to Warren Beatty.
Good to know.
Had no idea. I lived my entire life thinking that. But anyway, Boorman did really want Jon Voight to do the film, but he was the one that had the most trouble getting into it. He didn't want to do it. He declined this several times.
Okay. He had to be persuaded.
Yes. Well, he stopped reading the script after the rape scene. And so Boorman called him and was like, finish the damn script.
Right. Come on, finish the script.
Oh, honestly, because they have some more recent interviews with the cast on this Blu-ray. Okay. I know. Well, because it was 2000. I had to look this up. 2008 is when Jon Voight went super conservative, like Wackadoodle Train.
Right. Okay.
But it's. I think I just realized I haven't seen that many Jon Voight movies, and so when I see him and he's not using the Paul Cerrone voice, it feels weird.
So he's not from Panama in this movie? Okay.
Paraguay.
Right, Paraguay. Sorry.
Paraguay.
I mean, I could be forgiven because that is not a Paraguayan accent.
Oh, it's an unintelligible accent. But but the one part of the script that really got to him, that he was like, okay, I think I get it now, is the scene when his character is climbing up the cliff to, like, go kill the mountain man. And he stops to appreciate the view.
Right.
He just really thought that was nice.
Okay. You know what? Sometimes as actors and human beings, we also need to be reminded to reconnect with nature.
Absolutely. Burt Reynolds was the last to be cast, and funnily enough, the studio did not want him because he had been in 3 TV series that all failed and hadn't been in many, if any, or he has been in some movies, but none of them were very good. But Boorman did a little bit kind of a sneaky thing where he basically invited Reynolds to the back lot and brought him into the same room with Jon Voight and asked them to improv together. And
they had good chemistry and everybody saw it.
Exactly. So then the studio relented. But yeah, I looked this up too. I was like, wow, yeah, Burt Reynolds from 1950 to 1970 was like doing a lot of not great things.
Oh, okay. I wonder if I maybe got my actor switched up. Maybe it was Reynolds who needed this movie then.
Maybe. I'm not really sure. But I mean, nevertheless, as you said, this was his big breakout. This got him more
Smoking
big
the
things.
Bandit, right?
Well, yeah, I definitely led to Smoking the Bandit. I'm sure he would have. I don't know if he would have gotten that if this film wouldn't have come out.
Mm-hmm.
But they did a lot of rehearsals before filming officially began, which, as we know, is not super common with a lot of films. But it started with Dickie sitting in on them, and at Boorman's invitation, interestingly enough. But basically, as they were rehearsing, Dickie would be sitting there just making these audible noises and groans whenever he heard certain lines spoken that didn't match to how he envisioned them spoken.
Oh, dude, no. You can't be doing that.
Well, and this is why many times writers are not asked to stay on the set of the film.
It's so hard to separate yourself, right? I mean, this is a thing that he's obviously very proud of, that he's become very well known for. So I'm sure he has very strong opinions about it, but also, like, you can't be precious. This isn't your book. This is the movie.
Exactly. And so, like, I guess he walked in thinking he was essentially going to be a co-director, and Boorman had to pull him aside and be like, hey, man, like, you're making the actors uncomfortable. We think you need to go. And he took it in stride. He was fine. He was like, all right. It's actually really fun. If any of these interviews with these guys, they will mimic James Dickey's voice, and they all sound the same.
All right.
But also Dickey seemed kind of like a prankster. Like, he did this thing where he pulled all of the men aside, but Boorman and the 4 actors at different times, and said, well, the things in that book actually happened to me. And to that, and so they all thought they had this big secret. And basically, like, towards the end of shooting, they were like, oh, y'all, guess what Dickey told me? And it was like that thing where they were like, well, he told me that too.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so that probably means he's a big fucking liar.
Yes, this did not actually happen. Or if it did, for legal reasons, it did not happen.
Yeah, I don't think it happened.
No, there's no way this happened. But for the production, which did happen, whoo boy. So they shot this from May to August of 1971, and it was entirely shot on location in Georgia on the Tortuga River, standing in for the fictional Cohulawasi River. And oh my God. Apparently the studio kept cutting costs in an attempt to kill the feature. So because of this, they had the actors perform their own stunts and supposedly didn't pay for insurance.
Yeah, I didn't know about the insurance piece. You had alerted me to that because I messaged you and said, some of these rapid shots look really kind of dangerous, and I'm pretty sure that I'm actually seeing the actors on screen. Like, we're not doing any kind of strategic edits. We're not seeing the back of people's heads. It's like, no, that's John Voight and Burt Reynolds in a fucking aluminum canoe smashing into rocks.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what it was. So they were all training. There is only one shot in the film that uses a stunt double, and it is for John Voight when they are basically like sliding down into the gorge after Drew falls out, and there's a single shot of John Voight, or John Voight's character Ed, just sliding down like these rapids, and that's it.
Not even the one where Burt Reynolds goes fucking flying before he breaks his femur?
Nope, that was Burt Reynolds.
That is wild. That is so dangerous.
So it was a very, it was a bonding experience for all these men because it just, I mean, again, like imagine doing all this. Well, I guess you wouldn't be doing all this today.
No, you absolutely wouldn't, because A, you would have insurance, and B, I'm pretty sure as unionized employees, it'd be like, where's the stunt team?
So all four men had to train in canoeing and archery and also get fit. As I mean, most of them were fit anyway, but to get them in a state where they could safely make the picture. And ironically enough, of the four actors, the only one who had been in a canoe before was Ned Beatty.
There we go. Yeah.
Who, of course, plays Bobby the Klutz in the movie. But since they were filming on an actual river that was pretty hard to get to, and this was because Boorman did the location scouting himself, so he picked all these spots, but he picked this particular spot because it was pristine and basically untouched, but still looked very wild, and that's probably why it was hard to get to, because no one ever went through it. It was just overgrown.
Exactly, yeah.
For the river scenes, they would go into four-wheel drive to get them into the river at a certain point, and they would go, this whole crew... And by whole crew, this is what I mean. They have 2 canoes, the 4 actors, the cinematographer, the cameraman, Boorman, and the grip. Sometimes they would have sound, but often not, because they planned on dubbing over it later, since you weren't going to get good sound on a live river.
Right, yeah. No, it makes sense, but also just, okay, so this is, I'm not going to say guerrilla filmmaking, but it's definitely, it's not what you would expect from a large Warner Brothers film.
That's the thing. I'm just really sorry. If you had told me this is an independent film, I'd be like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. Like with this production, but that it was a studio film,
right? Yeah.
Okay. Like, but apparently, and this is what Boorman says, at this point in time, there wasn't a big difference between the studio and the director, so they didn't have like a studio rep on set and never sent Boorman any notes because Boorman technically was the studio rep as the director.
Hi, folks. I'll also be representing Warner Brothers and their interests. I'm loving what we're doing right now, so let's just keep shooting.
Exactly. Now, I did want to hone in on the cinematographer really quick. So, Deliverance was shot by future Academy Award-winning cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond. He would win for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, by the way. But he was hand-selected by Boorman, who saw the dailies for Robert Altman's 1971 film McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which...
Oh, that film's gorgeous.
Well, apparently the studio hated the dailies because they were so desaturated and soft, but Boorman loved them, and so he sought out Zsigmond, and upon talking to him, learned that he was actually a film student in Budapest in 1956, which was the time when Hungary was under Russian rule. And so... In 1958, he arrived in the United States as a political refugee and sold the footage he had shot of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution to CBS for a Walter Cronkite narrated documentary.
Wow. I mean, terrifying, but good for him.
I know. And so Boorman thought that someone who had been fired on by the Russians and survived was, again, we can talk about this, was a man. He was tough and wiry, and the guy Boorman needed, since the shoot on a raging river was going to be very tough, he needed someone who could operate as well as light.
Yeah, look, had to be a fucking man to shoot this movie, man.
There's so much of that. And that's, I think that's where, like, I do think this is a really good movie, but, like, I have so much trouble connecting with this movie because of that machismo stuff.
It's very machismo. It's like, not a woman was seen until the final fucking frame.
Yeah, which, I mean, makes sense. I get that.
I mean, it's kind of the thesis of the film, but there are definitely times where you feel like, am I watching a documentary or am I watching a fictional film?
Which, I guess, though, if you're thinking like that kind of, like, realism of it.
Does like a cinema verite of it. Huh?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, my God, that's exactly the phrase I was looking for. But that does make it more harrowing.
It does, yeah. And I think part of this, especially watching this, as you said, more than 50 years later, it's very easy to look back on it and say, oh, you know, sure, it's a 70s film, but it also just feels so much more gritty and raw and real.
Yeah, I mean, but 2 years before Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I mean, this movie unintentionally helps to probably get that film realized in some capacity. Like, I'm not suggesting it inspires Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's like, when we're thinking about things like rural horror.
Right. Yeah. No, valid point. And speaking of like the ruralness of it all, so you'll notice that the score for this movie is mostly just dueling banjos. That's because when the studio kept demanding more budget cuts, the composer and orchestra went out with it.
I mean, those are pricey additions. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, I guess the studio didn't really have a lot of confidence in this movie. No one thought it was actually going to be a box office success.
Which is super wild because I already know that this movie makes a fuck ton of money.
Well, and so that's the thing. So, okay, Deliverance comes out July 2nd, 1972. So this is a summer movie. Although, I mean...
It's a different time.
Yeah, I don't know if summer movie season is a thing in 1972 yet. But...
It's not, I can tell you, because a film that we'll be covering in the future will help to usher in the summer blockbuster season.
I think that's our 1975, correct?
It is indeed.
Okay,
yes, it is.
Okay. But, okay, because the studio didn't think it was going to be very successful, they didn't really push it. So like there were no sneak previews, there were no audience cards, no testing, nothing like that. They just released it.
Okay, so they didn't take it down to Texas and then ask him to reshoot the ending and cut a bunch of scenes, is what I'm hearing.
No, that's not. That is not what happened. What movie was that?
Well, that was disturbing behavior.
Oh, God. Oh, but yeah. Okay. There was an adverse reaction to the violence, unsurprisingly, and it was specifically the rape scene. And yes. Most critics gave it a positive review, and I hinted at Roger Ebert's earlier, but I just want to read this blurb. So,
oh, please.
He gave it a 2.5 out of 4, so it's not even negative. But
okay.
He says in the negative portion of his review, the film totally fails in its attempt to make some kind of significant statement about its action. It's possible to consider civilized men in a confrontation with the wilderness without throwing in rapes, cowboy and Indian stunts, and pure exploitative sensationalism.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I can definitely see what he's arguing, right? Because there is another version of this film that doesn't have these mountain men in it. It just has these city men trying to survive out in the wilderness against, you know, Mother Nature. And we've definitely seen that movie as well. It does work, but that's also Ebert deliberately saying, I don't want to address this element of the film, which many people would argue is a crucial facet of the finished work.
Exactly. And so, of course, at the time, Gene Siskel gave this a much more positive review. So he was a big supporter of this film.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is why I often like Siskel and Ebert as opposed to just Ebert, because, I mean, not always. Sometimes they would just rally each other up, but oftentimes you would have them have to debate or defend their position, and the other one would make them think it through.
Yeah, it was always way more fun when they disagreed on a film, for sure.
Yeah.
But either way, we're looking at an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and Letterboxd users have given this a 3.9 out of 5 or a 7.8 out of 10. But boy, oh boy, this box office success. So,
okay, hit me.
This movie was made for $2 million. Again, all those budget cuts. And it went on to gross $46 million.
Yeah.
In 1972.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure we didn't spend, $15 million advertising this or anything.
No.
Like, this probably got a gentle push. I mean, it was a summer release, as you said. They probably still put it out in a number of theaters, but like that sounded like word of mouth hit, baby.
I'm sure the rape scene was a big part of that, which is why it's
a talking point.
Exactly. But yeah, I can guarantee you they planned it for July because they were like, oh, it's an outdoorsy movie. So people are going to go camping in the summer. So let's release it in camping season.
Yeah, let's make sure no one actually goes camping.
But it does get 3 Academy Award nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Editing. It didn't win any of them, but this was also a tough year. It was the year that The Godfather and Cabaret swept the Oscars.
Yeah, I feel like one of those two films would take it over maybe the male rape Outback movie.
Well, and the funny thing is that Burt Reynolds was, I guess, potentially up for a role for James Caan's role in The Godfather, but there's an infamous, very well-known feud between him and Marlon Brando.
Okay.
It's like Marlon Brando didn't want him in the movie.
Right. It was, you're not getting in here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's about what I got. I do have some production stuff that I saved for the plot because there was quite a bit of information about the making of this film.
I bet, yeah. And I think some interesting things, because I also have a quote I'm going to attribute to the commentary. Even though I didn't watch it, it was apparently salacious enough to get referenced in the academic piece that I'm going to use.
Oh my God, I think I have this quote pulled. I'm so curious.
Oh my God. Man's man kind of movie.
Yeah.
At Shane Company, we know getting engaged is a big decision. But once you know, you know. That's the way our customers feel when they choose a Shane Company engagement ring. They walk into a warm welcome and walk out with their dream ring, knowing they got it right. For almost 100 years, we've been offering personalized shopping experiences. And we're in it way past the honeymoon, with a free lifetime warranty that includes the center stone, cleanings, repairs, and resizing for life. Shop with us at shaneco.com or at your neighborhood store. Shane Company, your friend and jeweler.
This episode is brought to you by Pluto TV. Summer of cinema is here, and Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Beverly Hills Cop, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Good Burger, Stealth, Four Brothers, and Star Trek. Bring the action with you and stream for free on all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never. Stream now at Pluto.tv.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Okay, so the film opens on images of nature, but also industrial development, and we are hearing the voices of our four protagonists before we are seeing them. So, like, it's almost nature documentary, and then kind of like, but what if man started to intrude on this pristine wilderness? And then you've got Burt Reynolds' voice as Lewis just talking about, we got to get into that river because they're going to flood it when they make this dam that's going to do hydroelectric power. And also, they're raping the environment.
We are... rape isn't a word that's really thrown around a lot in this movie. It's honestly mostly here in this moment, but it's a jarring way to open your film.
It's a jarring way. I would argue it's also a very telling thing. Like, you and I have often been accused of making reads or reaches, but I think this movie lays it out pretty clearly early on that it's like, okay, this is about man versus nature, or rather man's relationship with nature, and how that can be very, very confronting and often violent.
Okay, this might be weird. I didn't even think about this until right now, but given all of this and kind of how Boorman views the mountain men that are the rapists in the film, I actually think this could be a really interesting double feature with the feast that we covered for Earth Day earlier this year.
100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because I cannot help but advocate for national cinema, by which I mean Canadian cinema, I'm going to suggest that if folks like this film but maybe want a little bit less rape and a little bit more... let's get some violence on. There's a really great Canadian film that comes out 5 years after this called Rituals. And it's almost the exact same premise. It's like a bunch of guys go for a weekend camping trip. They end up getting attacked by not like inbred hillbillies, but maybe some mountain people. Okay. And it's like, we got to get out of these woods, except, bad shit keeps happening. And you have to decide, okay, should we try to leave our friends? Should we try to go for safety? Do I abandon them and just, make a run for myself and so on? So They're actually extremely compatible. And I am going to make us cover Rituals at some point in the future because there's just a who gives a fuck gay character in the mix. Okay. One of the main characters is just like, oh yeah, I'm randomly queer.
I've never heard of this, so I'm just looking at it up now, but it looks to be like it's more of a horror film than Deliverance is as well.
Yeah, there's like some proper fucked up sequences in that movie.
I'm excited.
Big fan. I wrote about it for Bloody back when I was doing my Canadian horror column. And it was the first time watching. I really had a good time with it.
Don't you love that when you go back and watch like an older film and you're like, oh my God, this is actually like really good. This holds up.
Yeah. And oh, wow, we made some genuinely fucked up shit back in the 70s and 80s and not like, oh, Michael Myers or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It just wasn't a franchise.
Exactly that. Okay, so just thinking about, the way that this film opens, we are literally saying the word rape in about the first 2 minutes of the film. I'm going to introduce my academic piece for the episode. So I'm going to pull from Isabel Machado's piece called Revisiting Deliverance, the Sunbelt South, the 1970s Masculinity Crisis, and the Emergence of the Redneck Nightmare Genre for the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. Which I was like, oh, that sounds very interesting. But Machado says it can be argued that the suburban Sunbelt is violating the wilderness and the, I'm going to say, S-word locals, because I don't like saying the S-word. It is often used in relationship to Indigenous people, and I have a lot of, it's a big no for me. So I thought that was an interesting thing, because when you think about this movie, you often either think of this rape scene. So you think, oh, it's the city folks versus these rural hillbilly inbred, coded, less intelligent, coded incest and inbreeding and so on. But I truly do think that that's like one element. And then the other half of it is actually like these men against themselves and how they just don't know how to function in the world.
Yeah, that is something that the way they were talking about these men and their relationship and how they kind of get more like
primal.
And tensions rise between them as the film goes on. And I get that in this movie, but it wasn't... I guess I was expecting like more or like bigger conflicts between the men. And there isn't really much here. It's more so they're just kind of gently annoyed with each other.
Yeah, I think because in part we're used to seeing films where there would be a stronger asshole. Like Lewis is definitely coded as the person that the other characters are going to get mad at. And I wasn't surprised that he's actually one of the people who gets injured early-ish in the movie, because it seems like this is the character with hubris and we're gonna, give him a fall, for lack of a better term.
But he's not the one that dies.
He's not the one that dies. So like there are definitely subversive elements in this movie that surprise me, because like you just said, I truly thought that we were actually going to have these men turn on each other more.
Yeah.
And we don't really.
Like Donner Party it or something.
Yes, sure. Just to bring it back to The Shining.
And actually, I agree with you. It feels subversive, but at the time, like, would this have been subversive in 1972?
I truly don't know, because I think that this movie is a game changer in terms of establishing a lot of the precedent. So I would probably argue no.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like this is actually establishing some tropes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we get things like images of different construction, like we're throwing shit down a hill, we're exploding what looks like a kind of landmine on a road, so very much, man intruding into nature. And we hear Lewis explain to his Atlanta business colleagues, so these gentlemen are from Atlanta, they're traveling to Georgia to, canoe on this river that is untouched before it gets flooded, and he promises that he'll have them back by the end of the weekend. And then we hear Bobby, who is Ned Beatty, joke, any hillbillies up there? And that's as they're stopping the car and they're getting out at this rundown gas station, which they also declare is the end of the line, i.e., the end of civilization, because we are so far removed from the city, we might as well not even be on planet Earth anymore.
Yeah, and all this is on location too, because some of these settings, I'm like, oh wow, like this, I mean, like even like the kind of not abandoned, but ramshackle shacks we have all over this place.
Yeah, and I think I read a piece where Boorman said, we didn't even have to do any set dressing. These places just look like this, So I think for him, or at least in his mind, he feels like this is an accurate depiction of people from this area of the South. Like, I have a lot of problems with these kinds of rural horror movies. Like, I really enjoy watching them because of the kinds of conversations. Like, you and I did an entire month on Patreon on rural horror where we talked about The Hills Have Eyes, and we talked about Wrong Turn and a couple of other ones. I think the X-Files episode Home. But, like, it's a very troubling depiction because it always feels like, oh, well, if you're from the South, you're missing a bunch of teeth and you probably are the result of inbreeding.
Yes, and I think it's important to note that John Boorman is a Brit, so he's not from America.
But that means he's bringing weird cultural stereotypes into it and then making a movie that kind of defines how we look at people from the South for 50 plus years.
So on this commentary, and I think it's at this point in the film where he's talking about, like, you know, how they got some people, but this is a direct quote. I'm just going to read it. He says, "The people in Georgia were all hillbillies. The reason there was so much inbreeding in that area was that there were..."
This is the quote. This is the one that I had.
This is it? Okay. Yep. No. So he says that he was hearing this from people. Like, he wasn't just relaying this. He was hearing this from people.
I'm sorry. I interrupted you. You have to finish this quote.
Okay. All right. The reason there was so much inbreeding in that area was that these were descendants of white people who married... Well, he says... I'm going to use the PC terms. Who married indigenous folks, and they were then ostracized by both communities and had to turn in on themselves. So this strange, hostile, inward-looking community grew up with that history.
Bullshit. Yeah. Bullshit. Where the fuck did he get this from?
I mean, he says he was talking to people in Georgia.
Yeah, I'm sure they're just volunteering all of this kind of information to a random Brit who's making him, like, shut the fuck up and acknowledge your racism.
And this commentary was recorded, I believe, in 2002, so 30 years after the movie came out.
And honestly, like, if you had told me he recorded it in the 70s, maybe 80s, I might have been a bit more forgiving and said, oh, we just didn't know much better. But, like, into the 2000s, shut up.
It's a thing where the portrayal of the rural community is not the best in this
movie.
Pretty
bad, yeah.
But, like, the rapists themselves, Boorman doesn't view them as people. He views them as, like spirits of the forest, almost.
My God.
Well, no, again, that's the kind of, like, more literary theme of it, and I think maybe this might play better in a book when you're reading it and can't see it. But in the movie, I'm like, these are just two mountain men that are raping other men.
100%.
But Boorman is very much intending it to be like, no, this is like nature's like knife, like stabbing them back.
Yeah. It's interesting because this, as we said, in some ways, this film sets a dangerous precedent that a lot of other films and even society at large, like, I imagine that there are probably some Southern people who look at Deliverance, and particularly like in this area, like the area that we're purporting to represent in the film, like, I wouldn't be surprised if people had a kind of relationship to it that, like, the trans community has to Psycho, where there's an entire generation of people who say, oh, everything I learned about, you know, Southern people I learned from Deliverance. Like, I think I saw some kind of quote where people were making a movie in Australia and they were like, oh, where did you come up with these kind of, like, gently inbred, you know, lower educated people who live out in the wilderness? And they were like, Deliverance. It's like, fuck me. But it should be noted that, like, there was other texts that were not doing this, but, like, were kind of engaging with some of these concepts. So Machado says in their piece, if the 1970s delivered films and television series that presented Southern white working class men as charming rebels, because I do think that we can view Lewis as that, right? Like, he's a working class, but he's a survivalist, but, you know, he's got a certain amount of charm. And there were a bunch of other texts that sort of did this, like a aw shucks golly gee kind of guy, where they're getting into trouble, but because they're coded at a certain education level or they have a decent enough job, they're kind of just lovable scoundrels. But then it basically pits them into opposition with these kinds of representations by solidifying the image of a degenerate race of underclass Southern whites, which basically gives rise to things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes, and other things, which Machado calls the redneck nightmare movie.
Well, I mean, it is a nightmare.
It is a nightmare.
And it is a movie.
Yeah. Yes, Trace, it is all of those things. Okay, so we have stopped at this gas station at the edge of the world, and this attendant, comes out a little bit gangly. They got the hat. They're looking a little, very not city folk. Yeah. And this person asks if Lewis is from the power company. And Lewis doesn't even acknowledge this. He just says, hey, can you fill up my gas? But it immediately codifies that there is a wariness from these locals that anybody who looks like they come from the city is probably a representative of big industry, capitalism, and so on, right? So there is that commentary of, well, if you flip the script and told the film from the position of maybe this gas station attendant, it's a bunch of rich motherfuckers pulling up, making snide comments about your way of life, your intellect, and then saying, hey, how about you do us a solid so that we can go on vacation?
Yes. And that's the thing is, I think these people are mostly respectful towards them, but not that these four men are necessarily rude to them, but
I would say Bobby is, and the others are kind of teeing behind people's backs. But they're not saying hey, fuckwit, come over here and do the thing for me. Yeah,
and Bobby even, I think, is more dismissive than outright insulting.
It's one of those things, right, where he insults this guy's hat, but he does it in that charming kind of scoundrelly way, right? Where he's just oh, you wear your hat funny, and it's dismissive if you know what he's saying. And this guy is just okay, thanks, I guess. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we haven't really talked too much about the other guys. So there is Ed, who is John Voight, and then we also have Drew, who's played by Ronnie Cox. Drew is the guy with the glasses, and he is the one who plays the guitar. So he starts strumming, and then when he starts to play, he notices that he's captured the attention of Lonnie, who is played by Billy Redden. This is the child who has a banjo, and they start dueling banjos. Some interesting things about Billy Redden. So he was cast in particular because of his very thin diamond sort of almond eyes, I've heard people describe it as. Mm-hmm. This movie, it sounds like it just fucked up his entire life. I don't know that he had a ton of acting prospects. He is not inbred. He's not developmentally disabled. He just has this sort of unique facial look to him. But he gets brought back to be the inbred banjo player in, I want to say, 3 or 4 other movies over the course of his career.
Oh, wow.
That sucks.
Well, and that's actually really interesting because he didn't know how to play the banjo. So these are not his hands operating the banjo in this scene.
Yeah, I thought that was so weird because I read that and I realized they fooled me. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, it's shot really well. You wouldn't be able to know. There's a really helpful infographic on one of the featurettes that circles the hand. It's look, that's not his hand.
Look. Movie magic. Yeah. Okay, so I do have 2 things that are going to make us feel a little bit uncomfortable about this character in particular. So in the book, this character is not white and coded inbred and developmentally disabled. This character is an albino Negro.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Machado goes on to say, in the post-civil rights era, African Americans, the others, capital O, seem to be off limits, right? Basically, we had fought our major war, South versus North, and we had decided that Black people were human fucking beings, and we maybe should treat them as such. So they were kind of off limits for this kind of commentary. And what ends up happening then is we shift our attention to something like historically stigmatized poor white Southerners who become the new other.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is what I was going to bring in, what Boorman says on the audio commentary.
Right. No. Yeah. Sorry for stealing your thunder there, but yeah, I knew I pulled that quote for a reason because I was
how can you not? Because right. it is just so much what the fuck. I mean, here's the thing: you said it out loud, sir, and we cannot not address it as a result.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I typically don't pull too many quotes from commentaries, but this one just felt like it needed it.
Yes. I'm glad we were on the same page for that. Okay, so Lewis goes about inquiring, hey, can we get somebody to drive the cars down so that they can meet us at the end of our trip? Because obviously we're going to be in the canoe, so we can't drive the cars to the end point. Yeah. And this guy's like, oh, I think you want to go and see the Griner brothers who live in Ori. And, Lewis is like, cool, okay, whatever. So we're going to do that. Bobby does make a genetic deficiencies comment here, kind of under his breath as we're surveying this gas station and the accompanying house around it. But, then we get into the dueling banjos and it seems like everybody's kind of having fun. Like the locals start dancing and everybody's watching. And I mean, we should note this movie is known for two things. One is the rape sequence, and the other one is the dueling banjos.
Yeah. And I mean, as we said, like this is a piece of music that will play throughout the entire film. Variations of it. This is the score.
It is, and here's the thing: I would be interested to know what kind of score they maybe had envisioned before they had to let the orchestra go, but I think that the banjo works as a bit of a score.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I honestly, okay, it kind of has the same, has more of the intended effect for me. That remember when we talked about, actually, The Last House on the Left on the Patreon for that rural horror? Maybe it was horror. It was something around that time. But where in the original Wes Craven film, the score for that movie isn't very ominous or upsetting. It's actually kind of happy in some parts, and it's
comedic,
yeah, and it's to make it just more jarring. It didn't really have that effect for me, but in this movie it does. Where there's not really like a lot of ominous score in the dueling banjos, but having this kind of jovial jaunt almost like play throughout the film makes it more upsetting.
I think it's that, and then it's always this reminder that the men are worried that they're going to be attacked by these mountain people, so they associate the banjo with them because they heard it here at the gas station when they were surrounded by these scary locals. So when you hear it, then even though it's non-diegetic music, like it's not like there's a banjo playing on the shore as they're going by in the canoes or anything, but it's to activate us as an audience, like, hey, be scared, because when you hear the banjo, that means the locals are coming.
Right. Now, so what do you make then of this child not taking Drew's ham when he tries to shake it?
Yeah, I think, again, it harkens back to the question that the gas station attendant asked, are you from the company? And I wonder if this is just very much, you're an outsider, and I'm, we had this moment of connectivity. And I do think that Drew is, quote unquote, the nicest of the four men, which is, of course, why he had to die.
Yeah.
But this boy only sees the outsider. Like, yeah, we had that moment, but that's as far as it goes.
I guess, yeah, but then why even have that moment then? But, okay.
I don't know. I could it be to disarm us a little bit? Like, to maybe make us think, you can form a connection with these people even though they are night and day different from you, or at least what these men would consider night and day different?
Yeah, I didn't mean like the film. I meant more so like the character of this boy. Like, why does this boy even engage in the musical tune and then shun him,
It's just musically inclined. You know what? There's a whole other movie where he goes on to like Juilliard because of this encounter. He's like, you know what? Music is my passion, and it does connect me to people.
I mean, this movie gets by on a lot of ambiguity. So sure, why not?
It's question mark central. Yeah. Okay. So we drive over. So it's basically Lewis and Ed, the John Voight character. They drive over to, I wrote Griner and Giner, so I don't know which one it is in my notes. They go over to these other guys, this place, and Lewis explains that, like, there's so many telling weird moments in this film that offer us character insight, but like you do have to be paying attention because so much of it is presented as innocuous dialogue. So like Lewis is talking to Ed as they're driving, and he says, I don't believe in insurance. Like, so he doesn't have any insurance. And he says it's because there's no risk. And you're just like, okay, like it's part of his life philosophy, right? He is in control of everything because he's a survivalist, but also he doesn't trust authoritarian things because he's ready for the system to crack.
Yeah.
So that's why he himself is on the verge of becoming a mountain man.
Lewis is the most difficult character for me to connect with in this movie because he is just such a polar opposite of who I am as a person.
Yeah. He's like, let's go out to the woods and be men. And you're like, how about we stay in the city and play video games?
Exactly, yeah. Not like he even knows what a video game is in 1972, but yes.
Let's stay in the city and play Pong. I don't even think it'd been invented yet. I think it's an 80s thing. Okay, yeah. So they end up arriving at these guys' place, and Lewis is essentially warned, oh, you don't want to go on that river. It's not going to work out for you. And Lewis is adamant. He absolutely knows what he wants to do, and he's going to do it. So he says, will you drive my cars or not? And he says, I will pay you $30. And this guy counters with $50. They end up bartering down to $40. But when the $50 rebuttal comes back, Lewis does say, $50 my ass.
Yeah. And this is the most tension, I think, between the characters and these townspeople that we get in the film, at least up until this point, because this to me was more of a confrontation than Bobby's.
Okay. Yes to all of that. But I'm just literally zeroing in on the word choice. Like, we're talking about financial exchange and ass.
Oh, my ass. Okay. And just so meanwhile, that person's like, yeah, your ass.
Yeah, your ass. Your ass will be mine. I'd be telling my friends about it. So... Okay, so they drive down the river and Lewis is speeding. He's in the front, even though he admits he does not know where he is going, but he is just so confident, Trace, that he will get them there, even though he takes a wrong fucking turn.
That's a straight man.
Stopping to ask for directions, letting someone else lead? Oh, sir, no. Not
at all.
Yeah, he does eventually get them there. I did kind of like this line. It feels a bit like a gentle thesis for the film where Lewis says, sometimes you have to lose yourself to find anything. And he's obviously saying, we got to leave the city behind, take a risk. Let's just get out on the water and find out who we are as men. But I think the movie is also saying, sometimes when you let go of the facade of who you are or who you think you have to be, sometimes you find out some dark shit about yourself.
Well, it could just be the facade of civilization. Like when you remove civilized nature from yourself, then what are you capable of?
Yeah. Okay, so we get all the shit out of the cars. We leave them with the other guys. Bobby is, of course, worrying. What if we get down to Aintree, which is the final destination, and they're not there? And Lewis is just like, you know what? You got to stop judging people from the way that they look and just trust that things are going to be okay. Which, again, some interesting commentary, right? Like, Bobby is very judgmental. He's the one who's been making all these comments. But Lewis also has certain beliefs that he upholds. It's just that he's not selective in how he applies them.
Well, but I think also to have Lewis say, you can't judge people by the way they look is interesting because you wouldn't expect this character out of the four to say that line.
Yeah, okay, so I actually just made a very dismissive, like, no, yeah, of course. And then I heard what you actually said and realized, you're right. I think this is another gently subversive moment where you would think Lewis would be the worst of the batch. And actually, he's maybe among the more open-minded of the four.
To be clear, though, I didn't finish the line, though. He says, you can't judge people by the way they look, chubby. Because he keeps calling Bobby chubby, fatty, all throughout this film.
Yes, he does. The fat shaming is off the charts. And of course, we should note, this is the 70s. We're not going to apologize for it, but this is very much part of the culture. And it feels very in tune with Lewis, right? Because he probably looks at Bobby and says, well, are you going to be able to handle yourself when the shit gets going, right? Yeah. Like when we hit the rapids, when we have to climb sheer faces of the gorge to get up and, murder somebody. Are you going to be able to do it? And he says, chubby.
Chubby. Yeah. Always. Yeah. Constantly says it.
He does indeed. Okay, so we're climbing into these canoes. We're starting to get settled. It is Lewis and Bobby together. And I think in part because he trusts Bobby the least. So he says, I'm the most experienced, so I'll take the least experience. And then the other two in the other one. Side note about the wardrobe. Because, I'm not going to lie. I don't like John Voight. Have not liked John Voight for a very long time. But he's looking pretty good in this movie.
I was going to say, he's kind of attractive in this movie.
And then Burt Reynolds is also looking good in this movie, but I was fixated because he wears it looks like a diving vest, right?
Yeah.
Like It's waterproof. It's probably, what am I thinking? Like a scuba.
A wetsuit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, cannot find the right word. Yeah, it looks like he's wearing a vest-style wetsuit, and it looks identical to what Thomas Jane is wearing in Deep Blue Sea.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
I don't think it's inspired. It's probably just like, yeah, there's only so many different derivations of wetsuits, but it was kind of fascinating that this is his just benchmark attire. Everybody else is sort of wearing casual, like, oh, I went to the store, I bought something that's waterproof or windproof, and here's fucking Lewis in a wetsuit.
Well, because it shows off the arm muscles.
It does. It does. I mean, he comes out of this movie with arguably the best career for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going down the river. And Trace, this is where the plot, I don't want to say comes to a halt for a while, but it's a lot of, okay, how do these men negotiate being in a canoe with one other person? And then who takes the lead? Because, of course, it's Lewis and Bobby again.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of, action shots. I'm not going to say that this is, whitewater rafting to the extreme, but this movie was directly responsible for spiking tourism in Georgia, in part because of these scenes. Like, it looks scary but exhilarating.
Oh, no. Boorman said that he had people come up to him in the years after this because people went to this river and died because it was dangerous. And people asked Boorman if he felt any sense of responsibility for it. And he was like, no. Like,
that's other people's fucking problem.
If you watch Deliverance and the message you take is go on this river and float it,
right?
You weren't watching the movie correctly.
No.
And I do think it's interesting they're using canoes too, because I was like, I mean, why aren't they using rafts?
I think a canoe would be pretty common. A kayak could also potentially work, but usually those are just for one person. And I mean,
I just think for like safety, it just seems like a raft is more safe. Maybe that's why they don't do it.
I think also it's going to be hard to get a raft down some of these narrow passages. Like you see certain portions and it looks like only a canoe could fit. So if you had a raft, you would just get stuck or it would break up.
It was really funny though. So I guess, Ned Beatty is the one who had been in a canoe before, but he let John Voight picked the first canoe between the two of them, and he was like, oh, I was so happy he picked the bad one, because John Voight picked the wooden one, and that one, I think they said they went through 4 or 5 wooden canoes because it kept getting bashed up by the rocks, but the metal one could hold, and they had one metal one for the whole shoot.
Yeah, I definitely would have picked the metal one.
But it's because the wooden one looks prettier.
Well, yeah. Okay. So we're shooting the rapids. We've got Lewis calling Bobby chubby, but also, I mean, again, this is a total reach, but I did think it was hilarious because we're reading this film through a queer lens.
Sure.
He just keeps yelling at Bobby to keep it straight.
Well, actually, I am a little surprised we don't get any kind of homophobic slurs in this movie, especially aimed towards Bobby, who is, I wouldn't even say an effeminate man, but...
No, but he's the one who would be on the receiving end of it. Oh, did I say what I did there?
Yeah.
But no, he absolutely would be the one that they would pick on, which I think is, as we said, like, this movie doesn't really go into that the men turn on each other or they're not particularly mean. Like, in some ways, they're actually pretty supportive of each other after specifically the sexual assault.
Yeah.
But in these early scenes, the closest we get to a homosocial banter where we're making fun of the other ones is references to chubby.
Yeah. I actually want to ask you too, though, because I know sometimes with films that take place over a finite amount of time, specifically like a day or two, like you have trouble sometimes because there's not really a lot of character growth. There's not time for it. Did you feel similarly about this movie?
I didn't, if only because there's only 4 of them, but it feels like we don't know anything about them at the beginning of the film. So it felt like a lot of the film was a process of discovery, like what distinguishes each of the 4 men from the other.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Because, I mean, like, I'm not going to lie, I don't think we get a ton of character growth. It feels like if we do, the person who comes out the best in that capacity is Ed, because he's our de facto main character.
Well, and it shouldn't surprise you to know that, of course, all 4 of these men are like kind of like parts of James Dickey, but he identifies mostly with Ed.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we end up making it through this first set of rapids, and the four men are hooping and hollering, and Lewis cautions them that they don't beat the river, so they shouldn't get too excited yet. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we set up for a little bit of a reprieve. We've got Ed drinking beer. We've got Lewis shooting fish with a bow and arrow. And this is where he's really talking about the system is going to break and you have to become a survivalist. So he's gently probing, he's gently asking Ed, what kind of man are you? Because it feels like some of them have better or closer relationships. Like at the end of the film, we'll discover that Bobby actually doesn't know Drew hardly at all.
Yeah. I think
it's interesting, right? Like I think part of this was they were trying to figure out whether or not they could go and just do a man's weekend. But like, I mean, this is maybe unique for you and I because I feel like, A, you don't do a lot of wood camping stuff.
You're correct in assuming that.
But, I mean, there's a number of times where we've probably been thrust into relationships where it's like, oh, somebody's doing a bachelor party and you're going to have a couple of straight men in the mix. Or maybe you're the token gay at the bachelor party and you're like, we don't know each other, but we're going to spend a weekend together drinking, doing activities, and we've all got to find a way to get along.
Yeah, I've never really had issues being around straight guys personally, but I think it's interesting. Like in recent years, I found that if I'm thrust into a group of like just all straight guys and me, I find myself more on edge. Okay, but like not for any like traumatic reason where I had a bad experience. I find myself just more.
Do you have to shut down sort of parts of yourself, or you're just more conscious that, there are certain things that they're doing that are just completely different from what I would do?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And maybe it's because of the political times we live in where I'm just like, and not to stereotype straight men. Obviously, I know not all straight men are like fucking MAGA Trumpers.
Not all straight men. Hashtag not all straight men.
Everyone, I know that we make a lot of flippant remarks at the straight man's expense, and I hope you all know that they are all in jest for the most part.
Well,
I got in trouble at one of my Draft House screenings because I made a joke about how we didn't want straight men there, and someone complained about me.
You know what? I mean, I've gotten in trouble. I think we've even gotten a couple of reviews where people are like, Joe needs to stop singling out straight white men. And I'm just like, but the reason we make these kinds of comments is because typically those are the people at the top of the fucking ladder. Like, I'm sorry, but certain people get everything handed to them. And you and I are even upfront at saying like, in the levels of queerness, we're basically the safest because we're men and we're white. So like, even though we're queer and that knocks us down a peg, we're still above a bunch of other people who are going to get way worse shit leveled at them. So like, I'm sorry, but not sorry for saying, certain groups of people have a lot more privilege.
Yes. I just mean, everyone, we're not being intentionally, like, malicious in these statements.
Not always. Every once in a while. Just a gentle barb. Draw a little blood. That's all. Eat the rich. All that good stuff. Okay. So, yes. So basically, what we have learned from this encounter is that Ed is the most normal of these people, most relatable because we're also getting to know a lot about him. And Lewis definitely has if anything happens, look for me in the woods, or rather don't look for me because I'll just be gone.
Sure, Lewis, if you say so.
Yeah, well, he talks a big game. And then pitch him into one rapids and all of a sudden he's a big whiny baby. Okay, so that night we camp on the river and Drew brings out this guitar again. We're singing and, Bobby is... This is the other thing I don't love about movies of particularly this time period. Bobby is fat, so he must also be the jokester, right? So he's, of course, going to be the one to make jokes about fucking his air mattress.
It's like, if you can't be pretty, be funny.
Right, yeah. Lewis thinks he hears a sound, so he goes to investigate, but he comes back pretty shortly thereafter and says, no, I didn't really find anything. So I don't know if this is meant to keep us as the audience on high alert or to anticipate something, or if Lewis actually does hear something.
Well, that's right. What I meant earlier when I said like so much of this movie is based on ambiguity because, and I think on a first watch when I was in high school, I didn't really like that because I was like, "Where's my horror movie?" Like,
tell me, is he hearing something? Are there men out there, preparing to attack them when they go to bed?
I want my classy wrong turn, but so much, so many of the decisions these characters make is based on information that they are unsure of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like they're doing their best with what limited information they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so we wake up the next day. Ed is the first to awaken, so he takes the bow and arrow and he sneaks out. And this is that classic sort of survival piece. Right. I saw a bunch of reviews compare this to Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman, where it's the normal man who can't shoot Bambi in the woods with the bow and arrow. But, if you push him to the extreme, that civilized veneer will crack and then he will become a killer. He will go for the rape revenge. He will execute people who are threatening his family, etc.
Yeah, this is something called buck fever. I was not aware of this term. It's basically the equivalent of the yips, but like with archery or with hunting, basically.
Right, yeah. So he's got this deer lined up in his sights and then he can't quite make the shot. So he doesn't end up loosing the arrow, but he doesn't actually strike the animal. But don't worry, when he needs to make the shot, he will.
Technically not, though, because the first time he does that shot, he still misses. He still gets the buck fever.
Yes, he does, yeah. You know what? He's a work in progress, Trace. We just said it's only like a 24-hour period.
That is true. Well, more realistic that way.
Yeah. So they end up breaking camp, and this time Bobby and Ed set out together in the first canoe, and Bobby spends the whole time whining about mosquitoes and how Lewis just kept hollering at him the entire day before. So, of course, Bobby is the least prepared for this situation, and I mean, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do we code Bobby? You said he's not really effeminate, but he's definitely coded as the sort of least masculine, which is why I'm uncomfortable as we move into the sexual assault scene that he is the one who is raped.
Well, and I think that's an easy inference to make. Like, I mean, the implication is so clearly there, but I think what it's meant to be is though he was the rudest to the people at the first stop.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because we should note that when we are actually introduced to Mountain Man, who is the person who will be doing the most aggressive of the raping, he's played by Bill McKinney. There's also Toothless Man, who is played by Herbert Cowboy Coward. Toothless doesn't do as much, although he threatens. He doesn't really get the opportunity to act on his threats about Ed's pretty mouth.
He's kind of a cuck.
He's a bit of a cuck. He likes to watch, yeah. So we should note that neither of these two men have actually been introduced in the film before. Like, they were not at the gas station. We haven't seen them until the moment they come out of the woods and begin. This makes me so uncomfortable. It's you don't know these people, you start to react to them, and it feels like anything that you say is just going to set them off. Like that tension in the air as these two men come out, and you just think, oh, something bad's about to happen.
Yeah, and I actually think if you, for some reason, you're able to watch this movie and you don't know about the rape scene, I think this is actually really, really effectively done suspense.
Yeah, because you're just like, are they going to murder them? Are they going to attack them? Are they just boasting? Is it just bravado, right? Because this movie is so interested in different portrayals of men and masculinity. You think maybe they're just trying to scare these big city dudes. And it's like, oh no, these two want to rape other men.
Yes, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just happen. So I have a couple things about this scene, like just pull quotes and stuff. So, John Boorman, first, he says, the rape scene was, to me, in some ways, the heart of the film, because it was the rape of the river by the urban man and the rape of them by nature's revenge, if you consider the mountain man as a malignant spirit of the forest. Okay. He also envisioned this as a near inversion of the, I think he says something like classic scene or like the tropey scene we've all seen before, where a man is tied up and forced to watch his wife being raped.
Right. Yep.
Let's see. Ned Beatty and Bill McKinney spent a lot of time together. McKinney said it didn't bother him, it being, of course, this entire sequence, as it was all work to him. And he's a, quote, contemporary sexual person.
Okay. So he was open-minded about it. I mean, here's the thing, folks. If you haven't seen this, there's definitely some long shots, so you can kind of see where everybody is in terms of the framing, the positioning, and so on. But when it comes time to actually put parts unwillingly, non-consensually into other people, we mostly focus on Bobby's face. So he is squealing and he's making, uncomfortable, scared sounds, but I don't know why I feel like I need to apologize for this or suggest it's better than other rape scenes, but it could have been filmed in a much more exploitative way.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. There is a shot of Bobby's face where I think you can tell that's when the first penetration actually happens.
Yeah.
It's like a more guttural sound coming out of Bobby's mouth. But we keep things in a long shot. There's not a lot of close-ups except for Bobby's face. And then we cut back a lot to Ed up against the tree, kind of looking, trying to figure out what to do, as we can see an out-of-focus rape happening in the background.
Yeah. So during this, Ed has been essentially tied to a tree with his belt, but it's around the neck. So anytime he tries to move too much, he's strangling himself.
Yeah.
So he's forced to just sit there and watch. And yeah, when you said it does. It reminded me a lot of old Westerns where you see the S word, indigenous people. And they attack the homestead and they're raping and pillaging the women and so on. So this very much feels like a slightly more quote unquote contemporary version from like a 40s Western.
I could see that. But I guess it's more graphic though, just because it's in the 70s.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should note that there's still a lot of female coded or like rapey language that gets used in this. Like before we actually get to the rape, Bobby is ordered to move their ass up the mountain. They strip his pants off of him and they're smacking his ass. Like,
and they tell him to take off his panties too.
Yes.
They're not saying underwear.
Yeah. And we noted that we don't really know or understand entirely why the rape occurs. Like, I think I said
it's thematic. I mean, that's literally what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's always just important to say that there's maybe sexual gratification in the mix, but rape is inherently about power, right? So this, you could say, oh, well, these men just wanted to fuck other men. I think I said that, and I feel like I need to apologize for it. But the implicit piece that you should take away from this is that these men, the city men, came from out of their world into this new environment where they are not in control, and these other men are imposing their will upon them by sort of saying, oh, this is not your place and you're not powerful here.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And then also just because I felt the need to, I guess, confirm that you and I are not the first people, and nor will we be the last to ever do a bit of a stretch or a read on something. Machado identified that author Joan Mellon at the time. So like 1972, 1973, this woman is an author, but she also was like a kind of scholarly writer. Like she was writing in a bunch of like really well-respected outlets, but she read the film through the logic of repressed homosexual desire, saying that the rape scene was exciting because it evoked an act that they would willingly perform on each other were they not so repressed and alienated by the false accoutrements of civilization. So in some way, she reads this as a kind of fantasy, right? Like, let's get the boys together, let's go away for the weekend, and we're going to be men. But also, maybe being men means I secretly want to fuck other men.
I was going to say, that's the Brokeback Mountain of it all, right? Like, oh, we're going to go on a fishing trip, but actually just fuck in the tent a lot.
Yeah. Now, I can't say that this was a commonly held reading at the time. I think most people wanted to talk about, man's relationship to nature and what this means for Southern, like, depictions of Southern characters and so on. But I thought it was fascinating. I'm like, 50 years ago, people were reading queerness into texts about men going out and purportedly being men.
Well, so we've talked about how, like maybe like the cultural ramifications of how this affected people in rural areas. But like, what about queer people?
Right. I don't know. I went looking to see, like, was there someone who got excited by this? Just, like, did someone discover I had never seen this before? Because let's, again, not forget, this is a major Warner Brothers movie.
I guess I just think, though, in the sense, like, were there a lot of takeaways that was like, oh my God, that's gay men. They just want to go out and, like, rape a bunch of straight men.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like that would be an easy conclusion to come to for some people, but I don't know.
Feels like a cop-out, though, right?
Well, yeah, it does, but I mean...
Yeah, but it's still
it's a minority. Like, why not double down?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so it seems like Ed is going to be next, but Lewis arrives in the nick of time. We do end up shooting Mountain Man right through the chest with an arrow, and this sends Toothless running into the hills. They don't end up giving pursuit because they want to check on Bobby and Ed, who are both obviously a little bit injured, but it seems like Mountain Man is maybe not dead. He takes quite a long time to die, actually.
So I said, this guy takes a long time to die, and this is very intentional on Boorman's part, and also the scene that got them into trouble with the censors. So, not the rape scene, this death scene. Okay. Boorman thinks that violence on film is dishonest when a guy gets shot once and immediately dies. So he intentionally elongated the death of the Mountain Man. And the censors tried to make him shorten it, and he argued that these men should be obliged to see the consequences of their actions. So the only cut he made was 6 frames, aka a quarter of a second from this scene.
Yeah, because this feels like it goes on for several minutes.
And this guy, by the way, like when he's the body, that's him. They're not using a fake. So like there was a take.
Right, they don't have that budget.
There was a take, there's a shot, I think it's before they dig the grave, but like where the eyes of the corpse are right in the foreground, but kind of out of focus as you're watching them dig the grave behind the body. And during the take, this guy held his eyes open and didn't blink for 6.5 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
good for him. Wow. I did want to note that I don't know if this is intentional or not, but there's this moment where they look at him and we kind of get a near close-up of the arrow sticking out, but he's leaned over a branch of a tree, right? So he's kind of slumped. And the way that the arrow is positioned basically looks like a stand-in for his dick, and we get blood dripping off of it, which I thought was really poetic.
I hope that was intentional, actually. I didn't catch that when I watched it, but like that, I hope that was an intentional, like, visual homage.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so we have killed a man. The other one is potentially running to alert the authorities, to gather a group of people and come back for vengeance. So we need to decide how we're going to handle the situation. So this is arguably where the film kicks into a different kind of survival gear, right?
Yeah, because it's not just we have to survive. It's also like, oh, we have to not get caught.
Yes. Yeah. The rest of it is, how do we get out of the woods? How do we make sure that we don't go down for this? How do we cover up what we did?
And I do, because these conversations right here are where you kind of learn the most about each of the 4 men and their moral code specifically, because shocker, Drew has the best one.
Yeah. Or maybe just the most conventional one, or the one that we would all like to think we embody.
Well, actually, one of my favorite moments in this sequence too is when Bobby tries to attack the corpse of his rapist.
Yeah. I mean, he wants his power back, right?
Oh, no, for sure. I just thought it was a really good moment because I think Lewis is the one that stops him. But either way, it was just like a primal moment for Ned Beatty.
Yeah. I actually do like all of the performances in this film. I think everyone was well cast, and I think they do a good job in their roles.
Well, and that's the funny, because I think Ned Beatty, he wasn't necessarily typecast, because how do you typecast like male rape victim? But like,
right.
But he really couldn't escape this scene this was his first film role. Like, it says something, but I think it's reductive to just limit his performance to the rape scene, because I actually think a lot of the post-rape scene stuff with him is his best work in the film.
Yeah. I mean, it's inherently more interesting to watch a character process the trauma and what he doesn't do. Like, there were a bunch of times where I thought he was going to break down. I thought that he was, I think in other films and maybe more contemporary films, we would see him really suffering from PTSD. And I think we're seeing signs of it, but not in the way that I would normally expect.
Well, because there's no time to have PTSD right now. We've got to get off this river.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned everybody's kind of got a different reaction to this. So Drew is very much, we take the body out and we go to the sheriff. Like, that's what we're going to do because it's the right thing to do. Lewis says, this is going to ruin our lives. Let's not let's embody, I know what you did last summer.
Yeah.
Cover this fucking shit up and never look back.
There are 2 instances in this movie where I was like, I think Kevin Williamson just lifted dialogue for I Know What You Did Last Summer. And this, let's take a vote, was one of them.
Yeah. So that's the 2 opposite sides. And then it basically falls to Bobby and then also Drew to decide, okay, what are we going to do? Because it's the majority rules. So Lewis is very manipulative with this. He essentially looks at Bobby and says, well, you don't want this getting out, do you? As in, you would be less of a man if people knew that someone on my own had his way with you. And Bobby says, I just want to put this behind me.
Well, and that's the thing. He says, like, there's no way we can change what happened to Bobby. We've got to do the right thing right here. And of course, big air quotes.
Yeah.
Ed, we're going to have to live with this for the rest of our lives. Like, ugh.
Yeah. So Drew, I don't think Drew really has a strong opinion about this. So he mostly just says, let's just get on with it. So we carry this body down this hill, up, a kind of offshoot of the river. It's very slippery looking. Again, several passages in this film go on for a very long time, especially compared to the way we would normally edit things. Like, everything would be about 2 to 3 minutes shorter in a contemporary film.
Yeah, this grave digging scene just goes on.
On.
It's honestly the exhaustion the characters are feeling like transfers over to the audience.
Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that it's not effective. It's just, I was like, oh, right. We made movies differently back in the 70s because we wouldn't have done it this way nowadays. It'd be like, it's too slow. You got to pick up the spacing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And I think also Drew is the one to watch in this scene, too, because he's the one that really doesn't want to be doing this specific thing. And he almost goes into like a fugue state as he starts digging. Like, he's not even processing what he's doing.
Yeah. Okay, so we basically bury this body and then we just run, like full speed run back to these canoes, push off, get into the water, let's get away from the scene of the crime. It's like, okay, we did the bad thing that none of us want to take credit for, and now we just have to get as far away from it as possible, as fast as possible.
Do you buy their arguments, though, where it's like, we don't want to like do a jury of their peers, even though like the one we murdered raped our friend?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I guess it's like, do you want to take the chance that people will believe you or something? But oof.
Yeah, I mean, we noted that earlier Lewis was actually pretty good at saying, well, don't judge people by the way that they look. But his whole diatribe before he effectively puts it onto Bobby and says, you don't want this getting out, is he says, oh, well, if we do report this, every single person is probably a relative of this guy.
Yep.
So we can't afford to take the risks that we get a jury of his family and peers and so on. And it's not a great moment. Like, to me, it's actually very telling of who Lewis actually is.
Oh, absolutely. Lewis is the asshole of this movie.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like, we thought he was, and then everything afterwards just confirms it.
But that's why you said it was obvious that he was going to be the one to get hurt. But I thought that to me was subversive. I love that he becomes kind of a whiny baby for the last third of this movie.
Oh, yes. It's very satisfying. Okay, so we're barreling ahead. Everybody is wearing their life jackets except for Drew. So, red flag, warning signs. That's going to be an issue. Okay. I had so much trouble with this. Yeah. So 4 men, 2 canoes. Drew is in the front with Ed in the back. So that's John Voight in the back, and then Drew, the guy with the glasses, in the front. And it just seems like, as you said, Drew is completely out of it. Like, he's in some kind of fugue state. He's no longer paddling. He's not responding to Ed. And then he just pitches forward into the water.
Yeah.
And then chaos erupts, right? Like, he's not wearing his life vest, so he's going to drown. Except, like, we're crashing these canoes. They're getting broken up. Like, the wooden canoe breaks in half because we're going over the falls. Everybody gets spilled out. This is when Lewis basically just gets shot out of a cannon and breaks his femur. And when everybody sort of rediscovers where they are, we come up for water at the end of this, like, long set of rapids. Drew is gone. So, presumably dead. We will find out later, but for now, he's just gone. Lewis is incapacitated. But Lewis is like, he was shot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I Trace, I went back and
I did
rewatched
too.
this 2 times because I was like, there is no sound. We don't see some kind of penetrative, like there's no reaction from him. I had no idea where this was coming from.
Yeah, I didn't either. And so because we didn't mention this, but before like the rape even happens, they boat under this bridge where the child banjo player is just staring at them. And so
yeah, Lonnie.
But before Drew falls into this water, we keep getting shots of Lewis, Burt Reynolds, like looking up and looking back. He's like, keep going. So we are led to believe that he saw someone up there, but we are not given...
We never see it.
Yeah, we never see that. And this is something that... I remember the first time I saw this, I was really kind of annoyed because I was like, what just...
Show us.
What just happened here? Yeah. And I think this is something that I think if I was reading this, like, I think this probably plays better in the book when you can't see what happens. And so you can only take Lewis's word for it. But the ambiguity is there. And even Boorman says, like, you know, there is no answer. Like, he might have been shot or he might have not been. But the way this looks, the way it's shot, it doesn't look like he was shot.
No. And that's what makes it briefly confusing on a first-time watch. But I ended up liking it after I accepted that even if I rewound it, I wasn't going to get confirmation. But yeah, there's something very interesting about this idea that Lewis wants to believe that they are being attacked because it fits in with his survivalist point of view, right? Like it's easier to have a villain, you know, it's us versus them, because that fits within Lewis's point of view, his worldview. Yeah. Whereas I think if you asked Ed, he would say, no, he just fell into the water. He wasn't responding to me. He was out of it. Like, to me, I wrote in my notes the first time he pitches himself suicidally into the water.
It read like a suicide because he turns around and looks at Ed for a moment before he just pitches himself over. And it's not like he throws himself off. He kind of just like bends over into the water.
Yeah, like we're about to go into the rapids, so we're already picking up speed, and it kind of seems like there's that moment where the canoe stays straight as the river goes down, and he just goes, whoop, whoop.
Yeah, but I also think that I agree with what you're saying about Lewis. I think that's probably why this is what's happening, but like I also think that Lewis can't accept the idea that one of his teammates would just
do this,
would give up like this. Yeah. There has to be a reason for it.
Yeah, especially since the worst, quote unquote, is over with, right? Like they have handled the problem. We buried the dude, so let's just move on.
Well, and I think that's interesting too for a first time viewer. If all you know about this movie is the rape scene and it happens 40 minutes into the movie, so you're like, where do we go from here?
Exactly. Yeah. Because even you might think, oh, the rest of the movie is just going to be them trying to get down this river. And it is in part,
Act 2 is
also
that.
not.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, that is the next step. Basically, there's 3 of us, but one, Lewis, is very badly injured, and he's convinced that they're going to get picked off because clearly Toothless is out there with the gun, and he's going to get them. He's waiting for an opportunity to shoot them. So Bobby says, well, why don't we wait until dark, and then we'll just take the canoe, and the 3 of us will go. Except that the rapids are so treacherous, it would be too dangerous. So Ed decides, well, the most logical place he's going to be is at the top of this gorge. Yep. So I'm going to climb up this sheer rock face. It's going to take me the rest of the day. I will take the bow and arrow and I will lie in wait for this guy. So if he comes back, I'll take care of him first.
And this is John Voight actually climbing this. He had a harness, but he was climbing this mountain.
It's terrifying. This looks like Cliffhanger.
Oh, absolutely. Now, okay, when it shifts to dark, did you notice anything like about the way this looked? Because I wrote in my notes, how was this lit?
Right? Because you can still see.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'm so glad I found this out. This was all shot in the daytime.
Oh, they color corrected it after?
No, they printed a negative into the positive so that white became black, and that's how he made it night. So if you look, because I said it looks so, it doesn't look like true dark, but it looks like it looks like a filter of some kind, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like this. It's this like negative filter. But I mean, it's not a filter. They're actually doing the science for it. But it is what today would be a negative filter.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just thought that was a really interesting way of doing it because that would never be done this way today. They would just CGI it.
Yeah. They'd feed it into the computer and be like, take out light.
Make it night.
But, I mean, you and I are so on record that anytime, I mean, obviously we don't want a bunch of productions to lose a bunch of money and not be able to do the things that they want to do. But sometimes when you're on a budget crunch, you have to get creative.
Mm-hmm. Also, wouldn't you rather shoot this at daytime anyway?
Yes, truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Ed is basically parked. He's waiting to see what happens, but he ends up falling asleep, and he's woken up in the morning when he hears a man approaching, and it is a man with a gun, and they end up facing off against each other. He fires a shot after, having... What is it?
The buck fever.
Buck fever. Thank you. So he hesitates, but he ultimately ends up firing a shot. But we, again, that ambiguity, you think, oh, he must have missed because this man keeps coming at him. And he's Ed. So he's not great at any of this. He ends up falling back and impaling himself with one of the other bows. So it goes right through his cutie little side there. And it seems like he's about to get shot by this dude point blank. But then, of course, this guy just falls over, and it turns out, no, we actually did get him.
He does make a shot, but he just shoots the grass. But this is really interesting, though. So Ed will get up in this guy's face because he wants to make sure it's the toothless guy. And he's like freaking out because this guy has teeth.
Yep.
Until he realizes it's dentures. But even then, I don't think it's clear who this is. And we are not meant to know for sure because I looked this up. In the book, what happens is he can't tell if it's him. And when he lowers the body down, the body lands on some rocks, pulverizing the face. So
come on.
So when he was going to go like double check the body, the face is already gone. So he in the book, he never finds out. And I guess you could argue in the movie, he never finds out. But like, I guess I thought the Toothless was balder in the rape scene.
This had less ambiguity to me. Like when he pulls out the teeth, I felt like that was confirmation because if not, I think the implication is really icky, which is, oh, well, again, all of these people just have no teeth. Or
I think
blah, blah, blah.
I think that is the implication of that moment. But I think the film is more interesting if this isn't Toothless.
Oh, sure. Because then we truly are fucked, right? Like, there's no amount of self-defense that you can argue because he was just waiting for this dude and then shot him with an arrow.
Because here's the thing, though. We'll learn later, and I'm going to step ahead here, but like when the deputy of the town, his brother went hunting and like they can't find him. So
you mean Deputy Queen?
Yeah.
Hey, girl, Deputy my cousin Queen went out into the woods for rape.
But we never find out which of these men is that brother.
No.
So it could be Mountain Man, it could be Toothless, it could be this guy, or if this is Toothless, then it's Toothless. But like, I love that. We don't ever find out who that is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the implication is that the cousin or the brother is Mountain Man because they look the most similar and have all their teeth.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you're not wrong that there's never direct confirmation. So it's open enough that if you wanted to, someone could easily make the argument, yeah, this isn't Toothless and Mountain Man is not Deputy Queen's relation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this dude is dead. And we lower the body down. I did think this was interesting. So we're still aware enough that we can't just leave a body out, and you can't just bury it up at the top of this gorge because I guess rocks. Ed doesn't have it's too rocky. He doesn't have the strength. He doesn't have the tools or whatever. So he lowers the body down with a rope. I thought it was perplexing that he doesn't just pitch it.
I thought the same thing too, but I guess it's like respect for the corpse. I love that he winds up in the water with this corpse, which I also wrote in my notes is very I know you did last summer.
Oh, that is true. Yes. Okay. So is this that second beat?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, granted, the corpse doesn't come back to life, but
well, but the way the water is moving and the fact that Ed has gotten mixed in with the rope, it definitely feels like a threatening moment, and it's shot really well.
Well, and that's the fun thing. The underwater shots in this scene were shot at a pool.
Yeah, of course they were.
Yeah.
Makes sense. But, I mean, you wouldn't know to look at it. It definitely looks like, oh, yeah, we just fell into the water. There's the body. There's the rope.
The magic of editing.
The magic of filmmaking. Okay, so we weigh this body down with rocks because we don't want it to get discovered. And then we think that we're home free. Okay, so we load Lewis, who is now unconscious. Like, it's been overnight and into part of the morning. So it's now just Bobby and Ed who are conscious and making decisions. Lewis is stretched out in between them, and we've now got to negotiate, I would argue, worse looking rapids.
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. Also, Lewis is kind of like, I mean, he's still in this movie for the rest of it, but he's not doing... Oh, he gets the Eric Stoltz Anaconda treatment for the rest of this movie.
He does indeed, yes. Before we shoot this new, more aggressive rapid set, though, we do find Drew's body.
Man, okay, so I actually think this is one of the most disturbing images in the movie.
So the body has been pretty badly fucked up by going over these rapids. So his arms are all kinds of broken and mangled, and he's basically just been caught in...
like a tree?
A submerged tree, because, once again, remember that we're flooding this river, so there's just a bunch of extra water. Like, it's very, very high water levels.
Yeah.
But, man, Drew... The corpse looks great, and this looks horrible.
So here's the fun fact about this. Ronnie Cox, there were no prosthetics used in this scene. Ronnie Cox could actually double joint his shoulder and bend it backwards that way. So all they had to do was paint bruise marks on his shoulder.
Jesus.
And y'all, go look up Ronnie Cox corpse Deliverance, because it doesn't look natural.
No. It looks like we've, dislocated a bunch of things or just fucked this guy up real bad.
But I don't know why. Even when the first time I watched this, I found this scene so disturbing. I guess just because it really feels like a real dead body in a way. It doesn't feel like a movie dead body, if that makes any sense.
And, we said that Ed is, by this point, really our de facto protagonist. Lewis is an asshole, but he's also, as you said, mostly unconscious from this point forward in the film. But Drew was the person that was nice. He was the person who tried to reach out to Lonnie, the boy, and make a connection with the community. He was the easiest one to get along with. He had no drama. He wasn't committing any of these murders.
Yeah. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I think he did kill himself.
I think so.
Yeah. I think I don't think he could live with the guilt of what they did.
Yeah. Which he didn't agree with it, but he was outvoted, and he was like, I can't do this.
But again, for me, I'm just like, the guilt. He was raping your friend.
Well, I mean, but here's the thing. I don't think he regretted that this man got his justice or his comeuppance. It was that we were now going to have to live with the lie forever.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay, so we actually weigh Drew down with rocks, which I think is the other perplexing decision. You could have said that we had an accident and then tried to bring the body back or something, but instead they weigh him down. So now we've got two bodies weighed down in one area. So if you find Drew's body, you're going to find the other guy's body.
I do. There is a great line from Voight, and I think it's shortly after they find him, but they're trying to figure out if Drew was shot or not. And it's Bobby's line, actually. Bobby just goes, "Oh God, there's no end to it," and it's like, girl, I feel you.
Yeah, this movie doesn't hit that beat quite as hard as some other ones, but this idea of it just keeps getting worse, and it's been such a long fucking day. I didn't realize until we actually get to Aintree at the end, and we go for the ambulance, and we finally make it to the hospital and stuff. I was like, when was the last time they ate? How much have they had to sleep?
It definitely wasn't that day, because because the rape scene was a new day, and then
overnight when Ed is up on the bluff.
Yeah, so I don't think they've eaten in 2 days.
Yeah, so they would be exhausted.
Yeah.
The other thing that we should note again, we will get to the rapids eventually, but when we find Drew's body, we do a bit of a eulogy because we discover that he had a wife and kids.
The people in the picture are actually Ronnie Cox's wife and kids.
That's kind of fun and also weird and gross.
That was actually there's like a 30 years later retrospective with all four actors reminiscing about. Actually, I think it was 2014. I think it was later.
Okay.
But Ronnie Cox says, I brought my children to see this movie, and they were 6 and 11 years old.
No, Ronnie, no.
And he was like, I had to talk to them about the rape scene beforehand. I was like, oh, you didn't cover their eyes? Okay. But he's like, kids are smart. They get it, though. They knew it was just acting, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you still took a 6 and a 7-year-old to go see Deliverance, but okay.
Yeah, can we do a wellness check on Ronnie Cox's kids? Just did they end up in therapy? Let us know.
Oh, my God.
Okay, so we have weighed down now both bodies. It's time to shoot these rapids and finally get the fuck out of here. And this is treacherous. This is scary. It's not helped by the fact that we keep getting Burt Reynolds kind of sitting up being like,
ah, my leg. Oh, that meat hanging out of his leg is a lamb bone, by the way.
Yeah, this is definitely one where I thought, so is his leg broken? What is that meant to be? It doesn't look entirely convincing.
Well, because we never get a close-up of it, so I kept being like, that looks like a fucking, like, handkerchief that's hanging out of his leg.
That's what I thought. I was just like, so something? I guess. Okay.
It is meat. It's just lamb meat.
There we go. Okay. So we finally get down to the bottom. This canoe is beaten the fuck up, but everybody is still alive. We haven't flipped it, which I thought was a surprise. But we end up... I love some of this imagery because basically to get to the point where we can get out of the canoe and onto dry land and reach safety with people, you have to go through this entire, waterlogged section. Mm-hmm. And we've seen a couple of different horror movies. I always think of In Dreams, that not great one, mm-hmm. where the whole town got flooded and then you just keep seeing like, oh, here's the spire of the church sticking out of the water and there's a whole town underneath the lake. But there's just something so eerie and creepy about it. But this is actually beautiful and macabre in a way, right? Like, it's so still.
Yeah, because this is also where we get, like, they see the abandoned cars, mm-hmm. and they're so excited because that means civilization. I was like, this does not look like civilization to me.
It doesn't look welcoming, no. And I did think it was kind of funny. Like, I don't know that this movie has a very strong relationship to religion, but... you can't help but notice that the first thing they see when they get out of the water is the Church of Christ.
Oh, absolutely. And that church will come back later.
Oh my God, I loved it so fucking much.
Yeah, and that's very intentional. But like, I think it's meant to be, like the eye of God watching them, like judging mm-hmm. them for what they've done.
Yeah, because welcome back to civilization. The very first thing that you're confronted with is like the eye of God. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we get out of the water. Ed more or less just makes a run for it and he says, okay, I'm going to go up. It does turn out that the cars were delivered to Aintree, so they are sitting there.
And they are surprised because, again, I think a chunk of their brains thought everyone in town is in on this. They're all mm-hmm. going to be looking for us. And so when they get there and it's like, oh,
yeah,
we're fine.
It's not Silent Hill, guys. The whole town was not in on it the whole time.
Yeah.
So Ed ends up calling for an ambulance. He and Lewis go, and he effectively just leaves Bobby to make a police statement. So good luck. But I mean, at this point, we should note he has actually been pretty seriously injured by that arrow through the side. So
right. And also the bruises on his chest, they look like leeches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he gets checked out at the hospital, briefly sedated so that we can sew him up. Lewis has to stay, but when Ed is released, time is unclear at this point. Like, has it been a day? Has it just been a couple of hours? Mm-hmm. We don't know. But he ends up going to what we will eventually discover is some kind of hotel motel.
Like a lodge.
Yeah. We'll see the interior of it with different levels, and there's a bunch of doors, so we know that there's more than just a couple of people being housed there. But initially it seems like they're just being put up by a large family. And I thought that was such a clever decision because we kept mentioning how, all these people around here are inbred and, family, it's people who all know each other. So I thought, oh God, he's walked into this and it's going to be this guy's family.
Well, in a horror movie, that is what this would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're nice. They're polite to them.
Yeah, and we should note that they don't look the same as the people that we saw. Like, they're not looking like Toothless. They're not looking like the people at the gas station. They don't look like Lonnie.
But they look like they belong here, though.
Yeah, they don't have the polish of our city guys, but they aren't country bumpkin in the way that we might have expected.
Now, we get a great moment, though, in this dinner scene when Ed, John Voight, he, like, weeps.
Starts crying.
For a moment.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I thought he was weeping because it was obviously the trauma. Like, hey, like this is all coming back to you.
Yeah.
So He actually, Voight talks about how much he likes this scene too, because again, it's also not very often that we see a man cry or weep like this in a film, but he's actually crying to people treating him kindly, and it's something that Voight likened the feeling that people who return from war, you know, they see that love is still here and they cry over that, and I was like, oh, that's not what I thought you were crying over. I can see it, but that's interesting.
I will accept it, but that's, you and I clearly took it the other way, which is that, no, the fucking trauma caught up to him and he has a breakdown. And I kind of like our reading better, if only because it does, yes, lend itself more to a horror film, but also I loved that it was contrasted with Bobby, who, P.S., no one ever fucking checks on, and he was the one who got raped.
Yeah.
Not even like, oh, okay, he has to go to the hospital because he can't, because then that would be admitting something happened to us out there. It doesn't fit with the story that Ed constructed. But Bobby also, I mean, I don't know if we're meant to just believe that he is internalizing everything, but he is putting on the best game face as this woman just talks about her giant sex cucumbers.
Bobby seems the most put together out of all three men by the end of this film. And
like he weathers this trial the best.
Yeah, well also he has to do that because I feel like he talks to the cops the most too.
He does.
He's kind of doing all of this. I agree though. I mean, like he's going to have to talk to somebody about
this. Oh my God,
like,
please,
he's
Bobby,
gonna have
get therapy.
A lot of trauma from this. But yeah, we are not seeing it on him, which I think is actually, based on what we know about Bobby, that's subversive. Because you would think he would be
100%.
He would be Lewising it, you know, whining and crying all the time, but it's the opposite.
Yeah, or having the breakdown in confidence or in the privacy of, you know, just Ed's company or something. And no, we never see Bobby crack.
No, never.
As far as we know. And here's the thing. I don't want to overly praise this because I don't want to make it seem like, oh, he starts the film as more effeminate and then he shows how masculine he is by not cracking. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting.
No. I don't think so.
I'm merely observing that it's very interesting that we might have expected Ed's reaction to come out of Bobby and it doesn't.
Well, I also think because it's not like, I feel like there's certain ways like that trauma can be conveyed in film, and we obviously see a lot of it today in horror films, but I feel like you could have Bobby going almost catatonic in a way, or where he's, you know, being whiny or something, but there's just like, he's in the middle here. He's not any kind of extreme, which is just, again, I find it so interesting, but I'm also like, but I want to know how you're feeling about this, Bobby.
Yeah, there's this brief moment that we get between Ed and Bobby, but it doesn't go the way that I had maybe hoped it would. Instead of it being, let's unpack what we went through, oh my God, we survived, or something like that. It's, oh, I saw you talking to the sheriff, who's played by James Dickey, and I need to know whether you stuck to the story, or do we need to change something so we don't get caught? And yeah, you know, we just said, oh, I would have expected this from the dinner scene if it was a horror film. And maybe this is a bit more conventionally thriller, where you say, is the plan still intact? Do we need to shift something? Are we going to get caught by the law? That feels a little conventional thriller.
Right.
So I don't know. I want my cake and I want to eat it too.
Yeah. Are you surprised? I mean, after we get off the river, there's like 30 minutes left of the movie. I guess, are you surprised that it goes on for that long after we leave 100%. The river? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I said, oh, I had memories of certain elements or aspects of this film, didn't remember any of this. Like, I kind of remember that they had to fight somebody and that they maybe had to kill the other person. But then I thought it was, we shoot the rapids and then we get out. And I thought the movie just ended with them getting back to safety. And instead it's like, no, let's have a big old conversation about this dying town and keeping secrets.
Well, because in some ways too, like the third act of this movie would be the first act after a cold open in another movie.
The sequel, right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Like, after Sally got rescued by that guy in the pickup truck, then she had to tell stories to the cops, or even like The Descent 2, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're basically sticking to the story, but it's very evident that the sheriff doesn't entirely believe them, and then this deputy queen 100% does not believe them. Well, he's like, these guys are responsible for something. I need answers. We need to go up there. We need to like dredge the river or whatever.
But it's also because Bobby like goes back on something he said, and he says, I never said that. And the guy's like, yes, you did. I heard you say it. But hey, who's more trustworthy?
Well, yeah. And Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about how, they're going to flood this river so that they can do the dam. And also the town is effectively dying. So it's an interesting, I guess, complement to what we started the film with, right? Where we're talking about the encroachment of industry and capitalism into nature. And then we see this written into people because this town it's not just dying. It's not like, oh, people are going to live here, but there's nothing for them to do. It's like, you can't stay here.
The church is literally being hauled off on a truck.
Yeah. Which to me is an interesting testimony of like what is important and what needs to be moved. Because the only things that we see getting packed up and moved, it's not people, it's this church and it's the coffins from the cemetery.
Oh, I thought that was such an, I'm not going to say interesting, but I was kind of like, why are we seeing this? Like, why do we have this like minute-long sequence of Ed watching bodies being coffins being dug up? I mean, I know why they're being dug up because, we're like flooding this area.
Yeah.
But why are we sticking with this?
It feels like a eulogy for the town, but to me, it's also like these people aren't willing to let things stay buried, right? Like they want the truth to come out, but also I think they want to preserve like as much of their way of life as possible. And I guess we're seeing the two things that are important to them. It's the family connections or the members of their community as well as the church because they can't bring anything else with them. So I said, I think this film is actually really problematic in terms of its depiction of these Southern inbred caricatures. But by the time we get to this point in the film, I found it fascinating because it's a different variation of that, but it's so melancholy, right? Like these people are losing their entire way of life because of people like our foursome who are just here to do, like early in the film, sorry, I'll say one more thing and then I'll let you go. Early in the film, there's this moment where Lewis says, like, they're going to rape the environment or whatever. And I think it's Ed who says, well, I think they're just, people have a lot of pleasure on the lake as well. Like my uncle owns a cottage or something. And like you get to the end and you realize, oh, Ed is talking about like what this town is going to become. It's going to be a lake where his rich fucking uncle can build a cabin and like go fishing or water skiing or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in order to do so, we had to ruin all of these people's way of life.
Well, and that's something that we don't get to necessarily see, except in these closing scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like again, it's ambiguous. We as the audience have to put it together. And meanwhile, the movie is still rolling out with this, is Ed and Bobby and by extension Lewis, when he recovers, are they going to get out of this scot-free? And I love that the movie essentially says mostly yes. Yeah. Like the sheriff says, I don't want to see you around here ever again. I just want this town to die in peace.
Yeah, but that's the thing is they never escape it because they will, as I said earlier, live with this for their entire lives. And you would think that, I feel like Lewis could probably get over it. Like, I feel like his morals are close enough. But, like, clearly...
Lewis is already back out in the woods camping and doing other bullshit.
Yes, but poor Ed. And we get this nightmare scene, which, okay, I never would have called...
Carrie called.
Okay, that's the thing. Apparently, Brian De Palma was, like, loved this movie so much that this was the influence for the end of Carrie. And I had no idea. It's not even a jump scare.
No, that's the thing, right? Brian De Palma basically takes, this is kind of weak sauce, like it's not very well executed, and then he perfects it for Carrie and makes it super memorable and very scary, and then he gets all the credit.
It is, man, it's also a thing where it's like, oh, this is the end, the movie's over.
Yeah, it's just, Ed never recovers because even though he's back with his lovely looking wife, maybe pregnant, and his son, everything seems like it's fine, but clearly when he goes to bed, when he closes his eyes, he will see this. Folks, it's just like a hand coming out of the water. But I love that the movie also just ends with him laying in bed with his eyes open. Like he's not even going to try to get back to sleep because he's that haunted. It's like he's stuck in a perpetual state of... this is what my life is now.
And the whole credits play over this. Like, it's just him awake, like, just kind of looking around. I just love to see what Boorman was telling John Boyd. Like, just look scared and nervous and
look at the ceiling like there's something crawling along it.
But because that's the thing, though, if they ever find these bodies, like, granted, would they ever, after a certain amount of time, would they be able to track it back to these men? Probably not. But they weighed them down with stones. So, like, foul play is immediately evident if any of these bodies ever come to the surface.
Yeah, but again, let's not forget that the whole area was going to be flooded. So it's not just, if they managed to get them where they were at the river, because that whole area is under so much more water. So I think we're meant to read it as, no, they're probably fine because the water level would be so high that they would just never discover the bodies.
I'm just thinking if they're flooding it, like, you're going to be moving up a lot of stuff from that that river floor. But I mean, but that's it. Like, all we have to go off of is, these men are going to be haunted by the fear that this might resurface.
Yeah, and there's no catharsis between the men. So that was the thing that I felt like it was missing, and then I appreciated that the film just said, no, I'm not going to give you that kind of closure. But there is no moment where Ed and Bobby or even Lewis ever get to unpack. Okay, so now that we're actually out of danger, now that we've left the town behind, now that we've recovered from our wounds and we're sort of back in quote unquote civilization in Atlanta, there's no moments where they actually get to talk about what that experience was like.
The closest thing we get, which isn't even anything, is whenever they're leaving and Bobby walks up to Ed and just goes, I don't think I'm going to be seeing you for a while, Ed. And it's like, okay, well, that's that, I guess.
Well, that to me was Bobby being very polite and saying a different version of what the sheriff said, which is, I don't want to see you around here anymore.
Yeah. Oh, see, I think you can also read it, though, as like, I've been raped and I can't be around you because you know that I've been raped.
Oh, interesting. Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, any interpretation.
They're all on the table.
Yeah. But, that's Deliverance.
It's Deliverance. Honestly, you messaged me and said, there's just not that much plot. It's a lot of, them shooting the rabbits and this kind of stuff. And I finished the movie and thought, I don't really know what we're going to talk about apart from some of the masculine stuff. And here we are. Well,
and I think that's just because, there isn't a lot of plot, but there's a lot in the unspoken moments.
Indeed. Absolutely. Yeah.
But, okay. Well, anything else you want to say?
No, you're fine.
Okay, everyone. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, some quick housekeeping. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Blue Sky and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. If you want to chat with other listeners, please join our new Horror Queers Discord. Link is in the show notes. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you will get 392.5 hours of Patreon content, including this month's new episodes on Hannibal Season 2, Episodes 5 and 6, Bring Her Back, Fear Street Prom Queen, 28 Years Later, a brand new audio commentary on Final Destination 2, and even though we're not dropping new content on the requel, you can now catch up on all of our episodic coverage of The Last of Us Season 2 and listen to all of them in one fell swoop.
There you go. It's like 7 hours nearly.
We did full hour-long episodes for most of these, except for one.
Yeah.
But, Joe.
Yes.
Oh, we're going fun next week. Okay. What are we talking about next week?
Yeah, we started Pride Month off on a bit of a dour escapist note with this movie, so let's ramp up the spandex content. And honestly, it's just not a year on Horror Queers if we don't talk about Joel Schumacher. So let's watch another Batman movie, Trace, and do the one that we haven't covered yet. So, it's time for Batman Forever, baby.
For, I believe, its 30th anniversary.
Oh my god, just more ways to make ourselves feel old. But yes, for its 30th anniversary, Batman Forever.
This is definitely the one that I watched the most as a child, and I haven't seen it in years because I watched it so much as a child.
Oh, I see. Okay. This is one that I saw in theaters and I liked it a lot, but then I was just like, this just doesn't feel like Batman because it's not Tim Burton. So I really resisted its campy, delicious charms for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm interested to revisit this. I haven't watched as an adult, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
We'll see.
It's an iconic Jim Carrey performance.
Oh, yeah, he's great in it. But until next week, everyone, we can cross out Deliverance.
That's banjo for cross out or queers.
I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Hello, Toxic Avenger fans. You know what that theme song means. It's time for another exclusive audio clip from The Toxic Avenger in theaters August 29th. This time, we bring you the sounds of someone cooking breakfast and listening to the news. Enjoy.
From New Chemistry High School for varsity tournament season. Coach Stanwyck, what can we expect from the Crimson Beaks this year?
New Chem is gonna nuke them.
Wouldn't want to be the Kennedy Cougars this Saturday, huh?
Man, fuck the Cougars! Fuck the Cougars!
Oh my god. So switching gears, we have a special exclusive...
Okay, that's great. Do you want to be part of a winning team? Want to stand up against the forces of evil, like the Kennedy Cougars and beyond? Join the fight at I'mWithToxie.com and then see The Toxic Avenger in theaters on August 29th. That's I'mWithToxie, TOXIE.com.